Good afternoon, everyone. Today is January the 18th, 2022, and welcome to the Ways and Means Committee bill hearings for the day. We have two bills, and we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to start with House Bill 165, and we just have one witness, and that is the wonderful sponsor, Delegate Johnson. So whenever you're ready, Delegate, please begin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's good to see you and all your committee members. Good to see everybody. I'm Delegate Steve Johnson, here to present House Bill 165, Sexual Abuse, Assault Awareness and Prevention Program, Human and Sex Trafficking. I want to give you a little background on this bill. This is the third year I put this bill in. And the first year I put this bill in, human trafficking was the third largest.
The one for today was sent on Friday.
Janelle, mute yourself, please, hon.
The first year I put this bill in, human trafficking was the third largest criminal activity in the world. From then till today, it has now moved into the second largest criminal activity in the world. And they think that it may be number one, but they really haven't been able to get a handle on the harvesting of organs part of human trafficking. The first year I put this bill in, I had over 50% co-sponsors in the House. Last year, it was one of two bills that were endorsed by the Women's Caucus. And still, we've been able to take this bill nowhere. Now, if you look on the bill, this bill was originally, I put an amendment in because originally I meant for this to be grades 6 through 12, and it was drafted 6 through 8. So I did put an amendment in to take that back to 6 through 12. I saw WBAL Sunday night. There was an activist on human trafficking, a lady named Monique Smith. She stated that someone is human trafficked every 30 seconds. There were 136 reported cases in 2020 in Maryland. That's reported. Most of our homeless runaways don't get reported. She also stated, and I quote, "Preventing human trafficking is as simple as having a conversation." As simple as having a conversation. And if you look at the physical note, it cost us nothing to incorporate this into the health class. Nothing. The reason that I looked to incorporate this into the health class was because I looked at a lot of other states that tried to set up a program, but they wanted to set up a whole program, hire teachers, make it a totally isolated class. And it was not cost effective. So I looked to see what we could do in Maryland, how we could take this on with our existing resources. So I talked to some directors of curriculum to see, since we already had a health class set up, if we could set this up in health class and do it in health class. And they told me that should not be an issue at all. So that's the route I thought we would take in Maryland. Where we could do it with existing resources, and it would cost us nothing. So that's what I'm here today to ask for your consideration on House Bill 165. I don't want us to dictate curriculum to schools, but I do want us to tell them it's time to put this in play. 3 years they've known that I put this bill in, and 3 years so far they've done nothing. So as the General Assembly, I think, has responsibility, and as adults, to our kids, to protect our kids. And it's as simple as having a conversation, and it costs us nothing. With that, I would ask for your support for House Bill 165. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, committee members.
Thank you, Delegate Johnson. I see Delegate Ebersol has a question. Delegate Ebersol.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. It's a great idea. There's a lot of places that we can let people know about human trafficking. I have a bill about hotels in a similar way. It won't be in my committee. I do see in the text that it says that it be taught by a teacher who is trained in the instruction. Among the things that I want to know is what kind of training will they receive and who will provide that training, and will there be any costs associated with that? Or is that something for MSD to flesh out?
Again, I don't want to dictate how they set up the course. They are the professionals. There are groups out there that have been studying sex trafficking for a long time that have offered that if the schools need help to set that up, they would volunteer their help for free. And this is we already teach like the dangers of dating, physical abuse in health class, but this goes beyond that. This goes to teaching our kids to recognize the red flags and the tactics that they use to lure kids in. The average age of someone who's sex trafficked is between 12 and 14. So they are very slick. They're good at it. It's a worldwide organized business. So, you know, we have innocent kids that are going against trained professionals. This is what they do. And it's to recognize the tactics that they use and to recognize the red flags.
If I could, it just goes to the language that says the teacher has to be trained to provide the instruction. So I understand everything you've said about the crime and the way it's done and everything, and increasing awareness, I think is a great idea. And I think kids need to understand it early because people are trafficked at a young age. I just am concerned that will be interpreted as teachers, you know, what kind of training we're going to require these teachers to have. That's all. It's not specific, and I'm a little concerned about that.
Yeah, again, the MSDA, the MSDE, they're the professionals. How they get the training set up and what type of training they think the teachers need, I would leave that up to them. I don't want to dictate that to them, but I would leave that up to the educational professionals.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for the sponsor? Delegate Guyton?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate this very much. I believe I signed on last year, and I hope I signed on to this bill this year.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Everyone, please mute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. I was just going to ask a question about the definition of sex trafficking and human trafficking. Most of human trafficking is not sex trafficking. Are you covering all sorts of human trafficking exploitation in this bill? And I'm sorry, I haven't read it this year. And then the other question I have is that there was a pilot program through a group called Aramenta, which is a sex trafficking programming nonprofit that we put forward in Maryland State Department of Education about 6 years ago. And I think 5 counties participated, and they did training for teachers. That's what the pilot program was all about. So I think that could address some of Delegate Eversol's concerns as well if you went back and sort of talked to them about what they were doing. So that's a suggestion.
Delegate Johnson, you have to unmute yourself.
All this time, still don't have it down pat. Thank you for that question. The human trafficking part of the education, again, would mainly cover the tactics and the tricks that they use to lure people and the kids in, to identify those, to know who to go to, who to talk to if they feel that they're being lured in or that they recognize the red flag. But to do that, we have to give them the tools to be able to recognize the red flags, the tactics. These folks are slick, you know, that's what they do as a profession. So I hope that answered your question.
Delegate Guyton, are you finished?
That's fine. I would love to have a conversation offline. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions for the bill sponsor? Seeing none, thank you, Delegate Johnson, and that concludes the testimony on House Bill 165. Moving on to our very own majority leader with House Bill 172. And you have several witnesses that are in here that will have 2 minutes each: Terry Cavanaugh, Lance Kilpatrick, and Donna Edwards. So whenever you are ready, Mr. Majority Leader, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. For the veteran members of the committee, this bill is a retread. It's an issue we've had in the committee the last couple of years. Haven't had the opportunity yet to take action on it. I hope this is the year. It essentially consists of two components, and to explain why this bill is introduced, I need to go back a few years. So you recall a few years ago in the federal tax reform legislation, they eliminated a number of deductions. One of the deductions they eliminated was a deduction that existed for workers' union dues. Those had been deductible under federal law, and because they were deductible under federal law and Maryland taxes are based on federal taxes, they were essentially deductible under state law. That ended when the federal government ended their federal deduction. I think we should bring it back. I think it's fundamentally unfair that we allow businesses to deduct on their taxes the costs of doing business and the various business expense deductions that exist, without also allowing workers to deduct the cost of working. And union dues are part of the cost of being a worker in many sectors of the American economy. So this bill would restore the union dues deduction to Marylanders, and at the same time, it would deal with another provision that has to do with those business expense deductions I mentioned earlier. I will say I think a lot of businesses in Maryland are reasonable in how they apply their business expense deductions, but it is technically permissible under federal tax law to deduct the costs of union busting. So when an employer wants to fight against a union, they have the ability to deduct the expenses for the frankly highly paid lawyers and other professionals that they hire to do their union busting work. And I think that decisions about unionization should be made without taxpayer subsidies on either side. And that's essentially what this type of deduction is. It subsidizes the ability of employers to fight against unionization efforts. The way the bill is structured, though, it's not about union busting. It just basically says that the tax code is going to be completely neutral on unionization. Whether a group of employees chooses to unionize is governed by federal law. It's a choice of those employees themselves. And the bill essentially says taxpayers will not be on the hook on either end. So it essentially creates what's called an addition modification. Those are words we don't often hear in committee because we're usually dealing with deduction, subtraction modifications, but creates an addition modification that if any business has claimed the expenses either for or against unionization as business expenses, they have to add that back in to their Maryland taxes. The fiscal note, because that's a little difficult to figure out exactly what the fiscal impact of that would be, is neutral on what the potential state revenue effects would be of the unionization addition modification. So, that's not clear in the fiscal note. I expect, though, it would offset some of the costs of the union dues deduction that we're introducing. And I'll just say, now's the time to do this if we're committed to creating a fair tax code for Maryland workers, given the budget situation. So I'd encourage the committee to give this bill a favorable report.
Thank you. Next, we will have Terry Cavanaugh for 2 minutes.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on this bill. Terry Cavanaugh, Executive Director of the Seiu Maryland and DC State Council. Seiu in Maryland represents thousands of essential workers in our schools, in healthcare, and in property services. I have written testimony that you should have, so I won't go over it. I want to thank the Majority Leader for introducing the bill. I just want to make 2 points, and really echoing what Delegate Luque has already said, is this is a matter of changing the tax code in a couple of ways. One is, it's really hard for workers to understand how they, through their taxes, they subsidize a union buster who's trying to in some ways, intimidate them against making their free choice to join a union. it's difficult enough to face, but then finding out that the tax code actually subsidizes that work, meaning the workers themselves are paying for the opponent's campaign. So we think that's really should be changed just on a common sense level. And the second, as the delegate said, as far as union dues being being a deduction, that would just restore what sort of a common sense approach. It's another way to, since most union members are either at some level of the middle class, it would be a middle class tax cut. So again, written testimony that we submitted, ask you for a favorable report of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Kilpatrick, you'll have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, my name is Lance Kilpatrick. I am the Legislative and Political Director for AFSCME Council 3. We represent approximately 30,000 state and higher education employees throughout Maryland, and we strongly support Delegate Lukey's bill here today. You may remember last year, the delegate shepherded into law legislation which would prohibit the use of public funds either in support or opposition to any type of actions that would seek to create members, units of state, county, or municipal government from joining a labor union, either in support or opposition. This legislation was enacted into law. Unfortunately, our private sector brothers and sisters were left behind, and this legislation would address that in a very positive way to bring fairness to the process. And really what this legislation is about fairness. I'm not going to repeat what Delegate Lukey and Brother Cavanaugh have already said regarding the tax deductions and things like that. We face those types of imbalances every day, and we fight to correct those imbalances. This legislation is a small but important step in the right direction to bring balance between labor and management in our ongoing collective efforts to better everyone here in Maryland. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And next, Ms. Edwards for 2 minutes.
Good morning. I'm Donna Edwards. I'm the president of the Maryland State and DC AFL-CIO, representing over 300,000 of our union members. And I'd like to say good morning, Madam Chair. Congratulations. And good morning, Mr. Vice Chair and the committee. This is my first time in front of this committee. Thank you. I'm not going to echo what's already been said. Unions bring wages, benefits, safety to all workers. We raise everybody up, and therefore it's a very that our union dues cannot still be deducted here in Maryland. This committee, as well as the legislature, has many tax credits across the board that we give to businesses so that they can take it off on their taxes. But this one thing that workers had as a business working expense was taken away by the feds and then double jeopardy by the state. So strongly support House Bill 172 and please replace this. On the second note, you know, Lance brought up that we did pass for no public money to be used for union busting. When you consider that it is the tax base that is most of the money that you use to give away tax credits, create new jobs, we're still subsidizing if we still allow private businesses to deduct anti-union activities as a business expense, then we're taking that away from the public coffers and from the tax that comes in order to create better and more jobs by giving tax credits for real valid reasons. So please, I would ask you to give a pass HB 172 because it really does take away the double jeopardy that we've established here. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the panel? I see a couple, so we'll start with Delegate Wilkins and then move on to Delegate Kevin Bailey Hornberger.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for the panelists and the majority leader for bringing this bill. I thought there were a lot of really important and compelling points made, and I just wanted to make sure I understood one that I think is really important which is that it sounds like we already did this before the federal tax cut. So I imagine one of the arguments against this would be the financial aspect. But so my question is, would it be a similar financial change to the state in terms of revenue loss with us taking this approach, similar to the financial revenue loss that we had before? So it almost be like a net zero sort of situation.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct, Delegate. Essentially what happened when the feds eliminated the union dues deduction is that the state of Maryland got a windfall of, it looks like between state and local government, about $5 million on the backs of Maryland workers. We got $5 million more than we would have from working class and middle class Marylanders. And this essentially gets us back to where we were and cuts the taxes again for those working class and middle class Marylanders.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Delegate Hornberger.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Delegate Lukey. Thank you for bringing such a good tax cut bill to this committee. My question, because of some Supreme Court law over the years, unions have had to sort of bifurcate dues from monies that they may accept from their members for political purposes. So my question for you is, like the dues part of it, how does the comptroller, how does the tax officials in Maryland, how do they differentiate between a political contribution to a union, which oftentimes happens, as opposed to a dues and then deducting those dues on your taxes?
Sure. So as a member of a union, the direct political contributions that go towards electoral advocacy are contributions that are individually voluntarily made by members, usually to a PAC that's associated with the union. Those are not deductible and have never been deductible under federal law. And so that would remain the same. That would not be affected by this bill at all. This only applies to the dues that a member pays to join the union, be represented by them in collective bargaining, to have the protection of the union if they're fired unfairly, that kind of thing.
Great. Thank you for bringing this bill.
Are there any other questions for the bill sponsor or his panel? Seeing none, thank you all very much. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 172. And that concludes the bill hearings today for the Ways and Means Committee. I will see everyone after a brief break under a new Zoom link for our briefing this afternoon on the homeowners tax credit. So I'll see you everyone in a bit. Thank you.